Yeah, the count is 50, so I can start this, I guess. Seema, in the last class, what we discussed? So in the last class, we discussed about the introduction part, right? We have seen your syllabus, what are your course outcomes, and what are the things you are going to learn in your operating system subject, right? So mainly we are going to learn about the operating system concepts, right? So what are the different services the operating system is providing? So everything we are going to learn in your syllabus, right? So we are means operating system is dealing with the CPU scheduling, right? How process scheduling, I can say how it is giving the processes to the CPU, everything. We will be covering in the second unit. And the third unit, we are discussing about the deadlocks and process management synchronization and inter-process communication. Fourth unit, completely about the memory management and the virtual memory. Fifth unit, we discuss about the file system interface and operations, file operations, right? So these are the things we are mainly going to cover in your syllabus. And we started with the introduction part. In that, we have seen what is operating system, the operating system definition, and what are the different types of operating systems we have. That means based on the type of the operating system, the services it is providing will differ. So for that, we have taken the examples of mainframe computers and personal computers and mobile computers. Right. So if it is mainframe computer, the main purpose is to process utilization. That means resource allocation, right? And hardware optimum utilization of the hardware, right? When it is coming to mainframe, the main purpose is to optimize the utilization of the hardware. Why? Because the common resources are shared among the devices. So there the main intention is to properly allocate the resources to the processes. That means it is not that only one process should get all the resources at the time, right? Means we have to give the resources equal time to all the processes. Then personal computers, it should support the complex games, business applications and on. And it should make the user task easy. You can say ease of use, user friendly. It has to be like that for the personal computers. And for the mobile computers, it should provide an environment where user can access to the applications with the single touch or by swiping the fingers on the screen, right? So this is about the mobile computers. Then we discussed about the components of the computer system. Yes or no? What are the main components of computer system? Please tell me. Please respond in the chat box. What are the components of computer system? Please, the roll number 57Q. Can you please answer the question? Roll number 57Q. Seema, we will be asking you questions randomly. You have to respond to the questions and you should answer. This thing will be maintained in the Excel sheet. Based on that, your day-to-day evaluation marks will be given. Right? So 7Q, please tell me what are the components of computer system? You are there in the last class? Are you present? 57Q. Okay, tell me what are the components of computer system? As I told you to maintain running notes, please maintain the running notes, ma. Write down the points. Sometimes I dictate the definitions which are important. The points also I dictate in the class so that you should make a note of it in your running notes. And randomly I will ask you someday to take the photos of your notes and upload in the drive. CPU, GPU, RAM. What is GPU? What is CPU? I asked you components of computer system. No, that means you are not active in my class in the last class. 57F. I will, yes. Tell me what are the components of computer system? Don't waste the time. 7F, please answer. You are there in my last class? Hardware, OS, very good. Application programs. Users, very good. So total how many components? 4 components are there, right? So if you see this diagram, correct? Yeah, if you see this diagram, you can understand, ma, right? What are the main components of the computer? You have 4 components, ma. One is computer hardware, then operating system, application programs, and user programs. So here user programs are the end users, I can say. So here users can be people, machine, or other computers also, right? Users means users can be people, it can be a machine or any other computer. And when it is coming to hardware, hardware provides the basic computing resources, right? That means hardware here is nothing but your CPU time and your memory cycles, I can say, and all peripheral devices. Here peripheral devices are nothing but IO devices. Then coming to this operating system, so here operating system controls and coordinates the use of the hardware among various applications and users, right? So I can say operating system here, it controls and coordinates, right? It controls the hardware and coordinates its use among various application programs. So here application programs are nothing but users can make use of these application programs to do their job. I can say application programs defines the ways in which the system resources are used to solve the computing problems of the users. Examples: word processor, compiler, web browser, database, it can be video game, right? So I can say I can use the assembler or I can use text editor, right? So these are the different application programs. This is clear for you all, components of the computer system? Yes or no? 4 components are there and I just gave you the briefing about these 4. Hardware means hardware components, right? So OS means it controls and coordinates, right? It controls the hardware and coordinates its use among various applications, right? OS provides an environment within which other programs can do their useful job or useful work, right? So this is all about the components. Then I discussed about the operating system view. Operating system can be viewed in 2 ways. One is system view, the other one is user view, right? So when it is coming to system view, the operating system can be viewed as a resource manager or control program. OS can be seen as the resource allocator or resource manager and computer programs, right? So you can see as a resource allocator, the OS acts as the manager of the resources such as CPU time, memory space, and file storage space, and IO devices, so on. So resource allocation is important where many users access the same computer. Where it is having more importance is where the resources are being shared among the devices. Multiple devices are connected to common resources, then the operating system has to control the access to the resources. It should act as the resource manager. And control program. As I told you, to prevent the errors and the improper use of the computers, OS acts as the control program. Right? So here, OS is a control program that manages the execution of user programs to prevent errors and improper use of the computer. Right? So how it is going to control the system, we will see in the next classes, right? So this is about the view of the operating system in as a system view. That means from the computer point of view, how the operating system can be seen. right? Now coming to this computer system as the user view, right? That means the user view of the computer varies according to the interface being used. I already told you in the last class, there is no PPT for this, but just make a note of these different interfaces. User view of the operating system. So the user view of the operating system can be viewed according to the interface being used. Please make a note of it. The user's view of computer varies according to the interface being used. So here we discussed about the 5 different types of interfaces. Personal computers, mainframe computers, workstations, mobile computers, and embedded computers. So in detail, I already discussed in the last class. So I am not going in depth about these things again. Just to recollect the things, I am just mentioning again, right? So here the user's view of computer varies according to the interface being used. So here, what are the different types of interfaces, right? Personal computer, mainframe computer, workstations, mobile computers, and embedded computers. And we have seen the definition for the operating system also. So universally, there is no accepted definition for the operating system, but some definitions are given like that. Like operating system is a software that is used for controlling and allocating resources. I can say operating system is a software that is used for controlling and allocating resources. And the fundamental goal of the computer system is to execute user programs and it also controls the hardware devices. And I can also say operating system is also defined as a program that is running all the time on the computer. So here it can be called as kernel. Right, the one program running all the time on the computer is kernel, right? So here operating system also defined means also defined as the kernel also. So I can say there is no universally accepted definition, but I can say it is a software used to control and allocate the resources, right? And the fundamental goal of the computer is to execute the user programs and to make solving user problems easier. It should make the user job easy. Right? So these are the definitions for the operating system. Now coming to this operating system organization. The next topic is, you can say, computer system organization. Ma'am, what does kernel do? See, ma'am, kernel is also a part of the application program, right? It is a part of the operating system, right? So whenever you are using Bootstrap program, what happens? Bootstrap will load the OS files, right? It will load the OS files which are required to run the operating system. So that OS files, I can call them as kernel programs, right? So first that part of the OS will be loaded into the memory and that program starts running and it will load the entire operating system. Once the entire operating system is loaded, then it will execute the user programs. Right? Kernel is a part of the operating system which was first loaded into the memory, which was done by the Bootstrap program. Clear, 7F? So I can say kernel is a program, right, that is running at all the times on the computer. Because it was first loaded, no, it should run all the time. Then only it can able to make the OS load and so that the system will run, so that you can do your job, right? Now the next topic is operating system organization. So in the last class where I stopped, do you have any idea? Because I am taking for 2 sections, I have a confusion till which topic I covered. This OS system organization is completed for you. I think till storage structures I completed. Yes. Who are there in my last class, please respond. This OS organization part completed, or you want me to repeat that again? Please respond in the chat box. You are there? Am I audible? Repeat, ma'am. Okay, no problem. Right. So let's see. Computer system organization. So if you take the computer system organization has several parts, ma. Mainly we have three parts. The first one is computer system operation. The second one is storage structure. The third one is IO structure. Right? The first one is computer system operation, second one storage structure, third one IO structure. So let's start with the computer system operation. So in the computer system operation, I told you like you have one CPU. If you take the modern general purpose computer, it is having one or more CPU and a number of device controllers connected through a common bus. So you see the diagram. Here I am showing you one CPU is connected to multiple device controllers through the common bus. That means through a single line, these are connected, right? Connected through a common bus that provide access to the shared memory. So here you have only one memory that is being shared between your CPU and the controllers, right? So each device controller is in charge of that particular devices. If you take disk controller is the in charge, or it is controlling the disk type of IO devices, right? Each device controller is in charge of a specific type of device, such as disk drive, audio devices, video displays. You're getting me, right? Each device controller is in charge of a particular type of device, right? And here CPU and the device controllers run parallelly, but they will be sharing the memory cycles. This point you should remember, right? They will execute parallelly, right? CPU and the device controllers, but they will be sharing the common memory. So I can say they are competing for memory cycles, right? So here, because they are sharing the common memory, I should say that to ensure orderly access to the shared memory, a memory controller synchronizes access to the memory. That means for the memory also, you have a memory controller which is synchronizing the access to the memory. So this synchronization, about this synchronization, we will discuss in detail in the second unit. As I told you, when we are sharing, when we are having a common resource, right? When we are having a common resource and multiple processes are getting access to the common resources, then we should have control over that common resources, and synchronization should be maintained there. So what is synchronization, how it has to be maintained, we will see in the second unit, right? So here the point, it is telling you that we will have a memory controller also for the memory, right? To synchronize access to the memory, right? Now, so in this computer system operation, we should learn about how your OS is loading and how your computer is starting, right? So for a computer to start running, it needs to run Bootstrap program. This Bootstrap program is loaded in ROM, R-O-M, I can say, right? This Bootstrap program is stored in ROM. It initializes all aspects of the system from CPU register to device controller and from device controller to memory content. Right? So Bootstrap program must know how to load the OS system and how to start executing that system. So what are the files that are required for starting the operating system? To load the operating system, what to be loaded, what programs to be loaded in the memory, the Bootstrap program must know. So to accomplish this goal, this Bootstrap program must locate the OS kernel. What is kernel means? It must locate the OS kernel and load it in the memory. Sir, you are understanding, right? So once the kernel is loaded, it can start providing services to the system and users. kernel is loaded. So once one instruction gets started, no, it will call the other instructions like that. Your entire OS will be loaded, and then the user programs will get executed. Right. So here one more point: some services are provided outside the kernel by system programs, and these are called system processes. Right. Some services are provided outside of the kernel by the system programs that are loaded to the memory at boot time. They are called system processes. In the Linux, the first system process which is being executed is init. INIT. As I told you, Linux is command based, so different commands are used for this. So the first system, that is INIT, init system process will get executed to make the operating system to load, right? So this is about the computer system operations. Next, we discussed about the interrupts. You have two types of interrupts, right? You have two types of interrupts: hardware interrupts and software interrupts. So if you take hardware interrupts can be generated as a signal through the system bus. Hardware interrupts are generated by the hardware devices. Right, hardware devices. When it is coming to system software interrupts are interrupted by I can say the software interrupts are interrupted by executing a special operations. We can call them as system calls, or you can also call it as monitor call. Right, software may trigger an interrupt by executing a special operations called a system call or monitor call. So what happens when interrupt occurs? So whatever the job which is being done by the CPU will be stopped for that moment, and then the interrupted processes will be executed. The interrupted processes will be executed. Once the task is completed, then again the control moves back to the program which was stopped temporarily because of the interrupt. Right? And here you have an interrupt vector. It is a array, I can say, which stores the addresses of the interrupt service routines. So based on the type of the interrupt, right? So for that interrupt service routine, it will go to that memory location, and that particular interrupt will be executed. Right? So you have different types of interrupts for different types of jobs, right? If it is an IO operation, you have a separate interrupt for the IO, right? So that based on the type of the interrupt, the OS will understand what type of interrupt it is. Then it will go to the location in the interrupt vector where that memory location is stored. So it will load that instructions in the memory, right? It will load the instructions from the memory to the CPU. Then that particular job will get executed. So this is how the interrupt being executed. Clear for you all? Hardware interrupts are signaled by means they will be sent as a signal using the system bus. Softwares are executed by a special operation called system call. That means it will generate a system call. So based on that, the interrupt will be served. So when a CPU is interrupted, what happens? It stops what it is doing, and immediately transfers the execution to a fixed location. So the fixed location here is nothing but the starting address where the service routine for the interrupt is located. Clear? Please respond. Clear for you all. Interrupts, software, hardware interrupts. 57B. 57B is there? Please respond. Otherwise, you will be marked absent today. Am I audible, guys? See, software interrupts are generated by the user programs, hardware interrupts are generated by the hardware components. So if it is hardware interrupt, that means if a device controller is generating the interrupt, it will simply send a signal through the system bus. As a signal, it will be sent. If it is software, that is, if any user program wants to send an interrupt, it means to send the interrupt, it should communicate with the operating system. How it is going to communicate with the operating system is by making use of system call. System call is a special instruction which will be given to OS by the user programs to generate the interrupt. 7B, why you are not responding, ma? 57B. Yeah, tell me what is hardware interrupt? What is hardware interrupt? You know the answer or not? Don't waste the time. If you don't respond, I will put the option for you. 7B. Okay, so we are done with the computer system operation. Next, let's start with the storage structures. Right? Storage structures, right? So the CPU can load the instructions only from the memory. You all know that the CPU can take the instructions only from the memory, right? Very good. You have taken from Google, right? The definition. I have given you the definition just before asking you, right? It is okay, right? Next about the storage structure, ma. So the CPU can load the instructions only from memory. That means it can take the instructions only from the memory. That means CPU is only directly communicating with the main memory here, right? So any program to run must be loaded in the memory. Yes or no? To run any programs, first the program must be loaded in the memory or stored in the memory, right? So you have two types of storages here. One is volatile and the second one is non-volatile. So remember, volatile devices are temporary storage devices, which are costly, and volatile means when the power gets off, all the contents of the memory is erased. Non-volatile means which are not costly, right? These are cheap compared to the volatile storage devices. And here the size of the devices is more, right? The storage size is more. Non-volatile means not temporary. These are permanent storage devices. Non-volatile devices are permanent storage devices. Storing capacity is high. And these are cheap when you compare to the volatile storage devices. So if you see the storage device hierarchy here, the first three, the top three comes under volatile storage. The first three comes as volatile storage, and the remaining the down four, the remaining comes under non-volatile storage. So here registers, cache memory, main memory comes under volatile storage. Solid state disk, hard disk, optical disk, and magnetic tapes, this will come under the non-volatile, right? So let's start with the volatile storage. Volatile storage devices are fast, expensive, and they loses its content when the power turns off. When the power gets off, the contents will be erased. Coming to these registers at a time can store a byte of data only, right? A byte or word based on the type of the registers. How the CPU is supporting, like, right? The registers are storing only 1 byte of data at a time, 1 byte or 1 word, I can say, right? And here the interaction between your memory and the registers can be done, right, through a sequence of load and store instructions, right? It is using 2 set of instructions for the interaction, right? So load instruction is used, right, to load the memory, to load the data from the memory to the CPU, because these registers are in the CPU. I can say these are the CPU registers, I can say, right? So the load instruction is used to load or to move the data from the main memory to the internal registers. Store instruction moves the content of a register to memory. Clear? Registers are used to store only a byte of memory at a time, and the interaction can be done using 2 types of instructions, load and store instructions. Loading tells you that the data is loaded from the memory to the register. Store is used to store the data from the register to the memory. Clear for you all? Load and store. What? Right? What is the purpose of load instruction? What is the purpose of load instruction? To load the data from memory to the internal registers. What is the purpose of store instruction? Yes, load instruction is to load the data from the memory to register. Store instruction is to transfer the data or to move the data from a register to main memory. Clear now about the load and store instructions? Yes or no? Yes, okay, fine. Now coming to the second type of storage device, that is cache memory. So it is very faster storage system used to store the information temporarily. Right, it is very faster. That means the communication between the cache memory and the CPU is very, very fast compared to the communication between the CPU and the main memory. That means the CPU can take the instructions from the cache memory very fast. Right? And the size of cache is very small. It is used to store the data temporarily. And cache is used to store most frequently executed instructions, right? Which in a system, which are the instructions which are being executed most frequently. More number of times if you are executing them, those will be located, those will be stored in the cache memory so that the CPU can easily take the instructions from the cache to make the program execution faster. It will load the programs very fast when the instructions are, yes, cache act as the buffer also, very good, right? The most frequently instructions are stored in the cache, and whenever you are loading them, CPU will take them very fast and it will be loaded very fast in your device. With very less amount of time, you can able to load those programs, right? And mainly I can say the cache is located in between your CPU and the main memory. So that means whenever you are executing something, CPU first searches in the buffer, searches in the cache. If it is there in the cache, it will take from the cache, right? And it will execute, it will start executing them. If they are not there in the cache memory, then it will search in the main memory. And from the main memory, it will be loaded to cache memory, and from there it will get executed. If it is not there in the main memory, then what happens? First, it will be loaded from the secondary memory to the main memory, from main memory to the cache, then it will get executed. So this is all about the cache memory. Then about the main memory. Main memory is also called as random access memory. I can say it is a rewritable memory. Computers run most of their programs from the main memory only. Computers run most of the programs from the main memory. So main memory is implemented in dynamic RAM technology. You can make a note of it. It is implemented in dynamic RAM technology. So when you compare with the cache memory, main memory is bigger, but main memory is not enough to load all your programs. That is the reason you have secondary memory. So I can say main memory is too small to store all needed programs and the data permanently. So that is the reason you have the secondary memory. So main memory is having the fixed size. The size is less compared to the secondary memory. It is not sufficient for loading all your programs. Whatever the files you are storing, whatever the programs you are executing, it is not possible to load everything in the main memory. The memory is not sufficient. That is the reason you are having secondary storage devices, right? Clear about the volatile memory, volatile storage devices, cache memory, registers, and the main memory. Clear for you all? Next, coming to this non-volatile memory. Non-volatile memory are nothing but I can say these are extension of main memory. These devices stores large quantities of data permanently. If you take non-volatile, this stores large quantities of data permanently, right? So let's start with solid state disk. Solid state disk stores data in large DRAM array during the normal operation. So it is using dynamic RAM technology only. The data is stored in the dynamic RAM array. But it is also having an hidden magnetic tape. It is having, right, magnetic hard disk. Sorry, it is having a hidden magnetic hard disk and a battery for the backup. What happens is when the external power gets off from the dynamic RAM array, the data is stored in the magnetic hard disk. For storing that, it requires the power now that will be taken from the battery, right? As I told you, it is having a hidden hard disk, magnetic hard disk, and the battery for the power backup, right? So when the external power gets off from the dynamic RAM, the data is loaded in the hard disk. But whenever the power resumes, external power resumes from the hard disk, from the magnetic hard disk, the data is stored back to the dynamic RAM. So this is how your solid state disk works. Clear? Next, coming to this magnetic disk, your magnetic disk is nothing but your hard disk. Whatever the hard disk you are using in your systems, laptops, right? That is called magnetic disk. It provides the storage for both programs and data. Most of the programs are loaded in the disk until they are loaded into the main memory. Right, all programs. So whatever the programs you are saving, whatever the things you are doing, everything will be stored in your hard disk, right? So once the hard disk once you want to execute them, they will be loaded from your hard disk to the main memory, right? Next, you have another type. They are called optical disk. Here, optical disk is nothing but your CD, DVD. So why we are calling them as optical disk is they are using the optical storage structure or optical storage techniques. Next, you have magnetic tape. Magnetic tapes are mainly used for audio video recording. If you see your this can be seen with the videographers, right? When they are capturing when they are recording the videos for storing the data, they will be using small cassette type things. They are called magnetic tapes. Why we are calling them magnetic tape is the data is loaded on a long strip of narrow plastic film, right? It uses a long strip of narrow plastic film with tapes of thin magnetizable coating. So this is the reason we can call them as magnetic tapes. So with this we have flash memory also. Flash memory means your memory cards, chips, which we can use in cameras, PDAs, right? And in the general purpose computers. So this flash memory is slower than RAM, but needs no power to retain its content. These are slower when you compare to hard disk, but they don't require any power to retain their content. Simply when you plug them, you can able to see the contents. They will be stored permanently on the flash memory. Right? Clear? Clear for you all about this? Next, coming to I/O structures, right? So I/O structures completely deals with the I/O devices. You all know that computer system consisting of CPUs and multiple device controllers that are connected through a common bus. Each controller is in charge of a specific type of device. It maintains some local buffer storage and a set of special purpose registers. So if you see the diagram, the top diagram, controller, see, if you see this diagram, as I told you, each device is having a device controller. So if you take the device controller, each device controller is having a buffer, local buffer storage, and a set of special purpose registers also. So inside the controller, you will be having a local buffer storage and a special purpose registers, right? So here the device controller is responsible for moving the data between the peripheral devices and the local buffer storage. So what the device controller will do is, whenever any user is asking to put the data on the peripheral device, then what the device controller will do is, first user will put the data on its buffer, the device controller buffer, right? So the controller will check the buffer. If something data is there, based on the type of the data, it will perform that particular job. So you want to put the data in the output, then this controller will take the data from the buffer and it will put the data on the peripheral devices, right? Then along with this device controller and local buffer and the registers, operating system have a device driver for each device controller. You have device drivers also. Why the device drivers required is, OS should communicate with the device controllers through the drivers only. You are following me? The OS can able to communicate with the device controllers through the device drivers only. So that is the reason, if you see in the older days, whenever you are connecting any device, peripheral device, like if you want to connect a printer to your device, you require the printer drivers, right? So without the drivers, you will not be able to use the I/O devices. You are getting me? You are following? For each device, you have a device controller, right? Device controller is in charge of that particular device. This device controller will have the local buffer and special purpose registers. So what is the job of the buffer is? What is the job of the controller is? It will check the data in the buffer, right? And that data will be given to the peripheral devices. So whenever there is some data which has to be put on the peripheral devices, the controller will take the data from the buffer and will give the data to the peripheral devices. Now, if OS wants to communicate with the controllers, how this can be done? Right? The OS can able to communicate with the controllers by making use of the drivers only. So that is the reason OS have device driver for each device controller. So the device driver understands the controller and provides the rest of the operating system with the uniform interface to the device. This device driver understands the device controller and provides the rest of the operating system with a uniform interface to the device, right? So if the hardware device wants to communicate with the operating system, right, then it can be done by the device driver only. So to start any IO operation, the device driver loads the appropriate registers within the device controller. So as I told you, this device controller is having some set of special purpose registers, right? So here to start any IO operation, the driver loads the appropriate registers within the device controller. So based on the type of the register it is loading, that particular IO operation will be performed. Clear? Right? Then the device controller examines the content of these registers to determine what action to be taken. As I told you, the driver will load the registers, and based on the registers, the device controller understands which operation has to be taken place, whether it is a read operation or write operation. Then the controller starts the transfer of the data from device to the local buffer. Right? If it is a read operation, it will read the data from the device, then it will put the data in the buffer. Once the transfer is completed, the device controller informs the driver via an interrupt that it has finished its operation. Once the controller completed its task, it will inform to the driver through the interrupt. Then the job is completed. No, now the driver returns the control to operating system so that the operating system will complete the job. Clear for you all? Please respond. How the IO will be performed. Very simple, ma. You have devices, IO devices. For each type of device, you have a controller. Each controller will have the local memory and the type of registers. And you have a driver also for each type of device controller, right? What this driver will do is, to start any operation, first the driver loads the appropriate registers within the device controller based on the type of the register. The controller will understand whether it is a read operation or write operation, right? And based on the type of the operation, the controller will take the data from the device, IO device, and it will put the data in the buffer. Once the job is done, the controller will send an instruction to the driver. Now the driver will understand that the controller job is done, then it will give the control to the operating system. Now the operating system will take the control over the operation and it will complete the job. Clear? Please respond. Very good. Now I'll have some water and come. Just give me 5 minutes, ma'am. Yeah. Hello, dear students. Am I audible to you all? Okay, fine. So now we are done with this. We are done with the components of computer system, right? We have seen the 4 components mark. Then we discussed about the computer system organization. In this, we discussed about computer system operations and the storage structure and I/O structure, right? Let's start with the computer system architecture. So you put the subheading is as a computer system architecture. So a computer system can be categorized according to the number of general purpose processors used. So if you take computer system architecture, a computer system can be categorized according to the number of general purpose processors used. So based on the number of processors we are using, you can categorize your computer system. So it can be categorized mainly into 3 types: single processor systems, multi-processor systems, and clustered systems. So let's start with the single processor system. So if you take the single processor system, you have only one CPU, one main CPU capable of executing the general purpose instruction set. Right? So to execute system programs and the user programs, right? So these programs can be executed as the instructions, right? So here, single processor system means you have only one main CPU capable of executing the general purpose instructions, right? So if you take all single processor systems, they have other special purpose processors. So these special purpose processors, we can call them as microprocessors. They come in the form of the device specific processors such as disk processor, keyboard and graphic controller and I/O processors. You are following me, right? Single processor system means you have only one main CPU which will execute the instructions. But it is also having some special purpose processors, right? They will come in the form of device specific processors. For example, you can say disk, keyboard, graphic controller and I/O processors, right? So these special purpose processors will run a limited instruction set and these will not execute the user programs. These are managed by the operating system. So here operating system will send the information about the next task to be done and to monitor their status, right? OS will send the information to their special purpose processors. You are getting me? The special purpose processors are device specific which will be controlled by the operating system. Operating system will send the information to the special purpose processors about their next task to be done and also to monitor their status. Clear for you all? Single processor systems. Clear now? You have only one CPU, but you have special purpose processors also. Special purpose processors are for the devices. You can call them as device specific processors, right? So these are controlled by the operating system, right? So operating system will send the information about the next task to be done and also to monitor the device status, right? OS will send the information to those processors. That's all. Now coming to this multiprocessor systems. Multiprocessor systems are also called as parallel systems and tightly coupled systems, right? So multiprocessor systems have two or more processors, right? Multiprocessor systems have two or more processors that share the resources such as common computer bus, memory, clock, and peripheral devices. So even though you have more than one CPU in the system, they will be sharing the common memory, they will be sharing the common computer bus, clock, and also all peripheral. Right? Here, multiprocessors. Yes, ma'am. Someone joined. Okay. So here multiprocessor systems having some advantages, ma'am. One is increased throughput, economy of scale, increased reliability. Increased throughput means I can say by increasing the number of processors, more work will be done in less time. It means the speed of the system will increases. Right? So you have only one CPU, you have two CPUs. There you can differentiate, right? So where you have two CPUs, that means I have a job which was given to one person and I have a job which was given to two persons. Definitely the job will be completed fast when two persons are doing the job. So that is the first advantage, increased throughput. By increasing number of processes, more work will be done in less time. That means the speed of the system will be increased. Second one, economy of the scale. Here, even though you have two processors, they are sharing the common resources. Right? That means the multiprocessor systems means the cost for the multiprocessor systems is less when you compare to two single processor systems. If you have two single processor systems, each system should have their own processor. They should have their own memory. That means that the cost is more. But you have only one CPU with two processors, right? Here you need not to have two different memory devices. You need not to have two different CPUs. You need not to have you need not to have separate connections, separate peripheral devices like that, right? So multiprocessor systems share the peripheral devices, mass storage, and the power supply. Hence, the cost is less as compared to multiple single processor systems. The third one is increased reliability. In single processor system, if one processor fails, your entire system fails. But in multiprocessor system, if one processor fails, the other processor will pick up the task and share the work of the failed processor. So that is the reason I can say increased reliability is advantage of the multiprocessor system. Clear? Clear about the advantages? Now you tell me what are the advantages of multiprocessor system? 56L. Roll number 56L. Tell me what are the advantages of multiprocessor system? 56L. You are there? Are you sleeping? 56L. Please respond in the chat box. $560. 560. They will share the computer bus, memory, clock, and peripheral devices. They will share the common memory, they will share common I/O devices, they will share the common computer bus. In CO, you learned about what is computer bus, right? What is system bus, what is data bus and all. And they will share the clock also. What happened to the 6L and 6T? So they will be marked absent for today. 6L, 6T. I am making a note of it. 6T. Where were you, ma? I'm calling your number since 2-3 minutes, right? You are present, I know, but you are not responding. Tell me, what are the advantages of multiprocessor systems? What is single processor system? Increased throughput, in reliability. What reliability? It will increase or decrease? What do you mean by economy of scale? You can unmute yourself and you can answer. If you are unable to type everything, I have no problem if you unmute and if you can answer what do you mean by economy of scale? What do you mean by economy of scale? Increasing production. No. That is throughput, right? To reduce cost. How it is reducing the cost? By using multi-processors, we can reduce the cost. Because they share the common peripheral devices and storage and the power supply. You should tell this. Multiprocessor share the common resources. Hence, the cost is less when you compare to the multiple single processor systems. Okay, fine. And when it is coming to multi-processor systems, there are of two types: asymmetric multiprocessing and symmetric multiprocessing. When it is coming to multiprocessor systems, these are of two types. One is asymmetric and second symmetric, right? So symmetric multiprocessing is called SMP, and the most common used type of multiprocessor system in present computers, like your Windows, Mac, all these are using the SMP only. First we will see what is asymmetric, then we will go for symmetric. Asymmetric means each processor assigned a specific task. Let's consider you have n number of CPUs and n number of processors. Here each processor is assigned a specific task. It is using boss-worker relationship. That means in asymmetric multiprocessing, one processor acts as the boss and all the remaining acts as the workers. So the boss will assign the task to the worker has to complete the task. The boss processor controls the system by scheduling and assigning the task to worker processors. The worker processors has to complete the task assigned by the boss processor. So each processor is assigned a task. The processor has to complete the task and give it back to the boss processor. But when it is coming to symmetric, each processor performs all the tasks. Here there is no boss-worker relationship. Each processor is individual. Right here, if you have one job, that job will be performed by all the processors. That means they will be sharing the task. That is the reason I can tell each processor performs all the tasks. Right? So this is the diagram for the symmetric multiprocessing architecture. Right? So here, if you take each processor is having its own registers and the cache memory, right? So I can say here each processor has its own set of registers, cache memory, and all processors share the common memory. So in SMP, if you have n CPUs, n task will be completed without causing any performance degradation. Why? Because it is having its own cache memory, it is having its own registers. So that is the reason if you have n number of CPUs, n jobs can be executed at a time without any performance degradation. Right? So it is the most commonly used system. All modern operating systems includes Windows, Mac OS, Linux will provide the service to SMP. Clear for you all, SMP? What is the difference between asymmetric and symmetric? What is the difference between symmetric and asymmetric? (563). Please respond. Asymmetric, each processor assigned a special job. Okay, fine. That is using what kind of relation? Boss worker. Very good. But it is coming to symmetric. I called a roll number. What is that? 563. Please, 563. Please respond, ma. What is SMP? All have to do same task. Not like that. I can say each processor performs all the tasks. Each processor performs all tasks. Each processor performs all the tasks. 63. SMP means. Very good. Where are you, ma? Symmetric multiprocessing. I haven't. I'm not asking you the abbreviation. What is SMP? You should tell me. What type of multiprocessing system it is? SMP uses boss worker relationship. 63. Yes or no? Each processor performs all the tasks. Okay, very good. Okay, fine. Let me continue. This is about the multiprocessor, and you have another type of processors, and they are called multi-core processors, right? So, what is the difference between multiprocessors and multi-core processors? I can say multi-core processors are a special type of multiprocessors in which multiple computing cores resides on a single chip. I can say in a single CPU, you have multiple cores. You can see the diagram. You have a CPU. Inside that, you have CPU core 1 and core 2. Right? 0 and I have mentioned here. Core 0, core 1. That means here each core will have its own registers and its own cache. Right? This multi-core processors are used in smartphones, ma. Right? Even though you have single processor, because it is having multiple cores and each core is having its own registers and cache, multiple cores will execute multiple instructions at a time. If you have 8 cores, 8 jobs can be performed at a time with a single CPU. You're getting me? Multi-core processors are special type of multiprocessors in which multiple computing cores resides on a single chip. Each core has its own set of registers and local cache. These are more efficient than the multiple chips with single core because on-chip communication is very faster and they will take less power than the multiple single core chips. Right? Here, the communication between the cores is very fast and they require very less power. So, that is the reason, right? Your mobile's battery time is more. Your mobiles, you can use them for long period when you compare to the laptops, right? Clear for you all about the multi-core? Yes? Multi-core means on a single chip, you have multiple computing cores. Each core have its own cache memory and its own registers. Right? These are very faster because core-to-core communication is very fast and it takes less amount of power. So that is the reason I can say these are more efficient than the multiple chip cores. Clear for you all? Yes or no? Fast. Respond. Yes. Now you have another type of processors, and I can call them as blade processors. right? Blade processors I can call, and blade servers also you can call them as, right? So in blade servers, multiple processor boards, IO boards, and the networking boards are placed in the same chassis. I can use a term here called CHASSIS. Right? On a single chassis, I can call it is a board kind of thing, and on that you have multiple processor boards, multiple IO boards, and multiple networking boards are placed in a same motherboard. I can say in a same board. Okay, board lo, on that again you have multiple processor boards, multiple IO boards, and the multiple networking boards. And what is the difference between multiprocessor and blade processors are? Each blade processor boots independently and runs its own operating system because you have multiple boards, right? So you have multiple processor boards, IO boards, and networking boards, right? So each board means each processor boots independently here, and they will use their own operating system. That's all. That is the difference between your multiprocessor and blade processor. Now, coming to this, memory access models. I have a simple term called memory access models. So, multiprocessing can cause a system to change its memory access model from uniform memory access to non-uniform memory access. So what do you mean by uniform memory access is? So uniform memory access means, right, at any situation, right, at any situation, to access any RAM from CPU takes the same amount of time in the uniform memory access. Uniform memory access ante entante from CPU to any memory location, it takes the same amount of time to access. But in non-uniform, some parts of memory may take longer time and some parts will take less amount of time for accessing to the memory. So I can say non-uniform memory causes the performance issues. So you have in multiprocessing, you have two types of memory accessing and uniform, non-uniform. Uniform means it takes same amount of time to access any memory location. Our RAM lo a memory location nunchaina to get the instructions, to read the instruction, it takes same amount of time for the CPU. But in non-uniform, to read some memory location, it takes some amount of time, long time sometimes it takes, and it takes a short amount of time for some memory locations, right? In non-uniform, you may not be able to tell you that how much time it requires to complete the job. Why? Because you don't know how much access time it is taking. So that is the reason I can say non-uniform creates a performance issues. Next is clustered systems, Andy. So clustered systems are also a type of multiprocessor systems. Here, these are composed of two or more individual systems joined together. Clustered systems means more than one system, multiple devices, multiple individual devices are connected together. Right? So here, these devices, we can call them as nodes also sometimes, right? It is a connection of multiple nodes also, I can say. So each node may be a single processor or multi-core processor. So here, what are the number of devices that are connected in a network? They can be single processor or multi-core processors, right? So here the cluster systems share the storage. They'll be sharing the common storage. And how they are connected? They are connected using LAN. LAN is a local area network. I can say it is a small short range network. If you connect the devices within a room, you can call them as LAN. So here the clustered systems are connected through a LAN, right? So what is the main advantage? Means what the cluster systems are providing is clustering is usually used to provide the high availability service. That means even though if one cluster fails, right, the remaining systems will work without degrading the performance of the clustered system. So that is the reason I can say clustering is usually used to provide high availability. Right? And here how they are going to share the common storage is by using the SAN, means storage area network. You have a common storage data, and that common storage will be shared among the devices in the cluster using SAN, storage area network. Right? So here clusters can be structured in two ways, and asymmetric and symmetric. So asymmetric clustering means in the cluster, one machine is always in the hot standby mode, and they will be observing all the remaining devices and all the remaining active servers. I can say if any one of the active server fails, this hot standby mode device will become the active server. That is asymmetric clustering. In the asymmetric clustering, one machine is always in the hot standby mode, and they will be observing all the remaining active servers. And if any one of the active server fails, this hot standby mode device will become active server. And again, if that resumes, again it will move back to the hot standby mode. In symmetric, there is no special machine which is observing, and all the nodes running applications and monitoring each other. So one is doing its job, at the same time it is observing all the remaining nodes. If any one of the node fails, that work will be shared among the remaining devices. That is symmetric, right? You're getting me? And here they are sharing the common storage, that means same common data they are sharing. So for that, to avoid the conflicting operations, it is using the distributed lock manager. Distributed lock manager means whenever one device is accessing to the shared data, the data will be logged and will not be available to the other devices. Once it releases the data, then that will be available to the other devices. That will be maintained by using the distributed lock manager. Right? And here you have another type of clusters, and we can call them as parallel clusters. Parallel clusters allows multiple hosts to access to the same data on shared storage. Right? Here, this can be done in the wider area networks. So parallel clusters means they have the common data, but it is accessing multiple hosts to access to the same data on the shared storage. Right? Here, this clustering can be done over the wireless wider area networks, WAN. This is about the clusters. So you see the diagram. This is how the cluster systems are there. So you have the common storage, that is storage area network, right? So through this storage area network, the common storage will be shared among the computers. These computers are interconnected in a LAN. So this is all about the clustered systems, right? So with this, we completed the topic called what? What is the topic we discussed? About the computer system architecture. So three types of architectures: single processor, multiprocessor, and clustered systems. So today you have Quizma. I am on switching on the quiz now. You take the quiz. And if you have any doubts in today's class, you can post in the chat box. I will be available till 1 o'clock.